I don't know why I jumped, that's the honest answer. I've tried to reconstruct the moment 100 times since it happened, sitting in my bunk after long shifts, staring at the ceiling while the station hummed around me. I've tried to find the thought, the decision, the little voice in my head that said go, but there wasn't one. There was a girl falling, there was water, and then there was me, already moving. My name is Marco Reyes. I'm 34 years old, born in Cartagena, raised mostly on cargo ships, and for the last 3 years, I've worked the loading docks at Vashkar Station, a deep-water freight port that sits at the edge of the Keth Protectorate, where the ocean meets the stars, and humans are considered useful, in the same way a good wrench is useful. Not impressive, not interesting, just functional. The Keth are tall, luminous, four-limbed beings who communicate partly in spoken language and partly in the color shifts that move beneath their translucent skin like slow lightning. They've been traveling between star systems for 600 years. They have philosophy, art, medicine, and a legal system so detailed that their junior attorneys spend 11 years in school before they're allowed to look at a real case. They are, by every measurable standard, one of the most advanced civilizations in the known galaxy, and yet none of them jumped. The morning it happened was ordinary in every possible way. I was on shift, overseeing a delivery of atmospheric regulators being unloaded from a freighter 3 berths down. The fog was thick, the harbor smelled like salt and machine oil, and the faint metallic scent that always followed Keth officials around, something like warm copper. I had bad coffee in one hand and a transit tablet in the other, and I was arguing with my colleague Dava about whether the Port Authority had miscounted the third pallet again. The diplomatic party arrived at the observation platform just after 9. I noticed them the way you notice background noise. Registered, filed, forgotten. Ambassador Seyrath was conducting a tour for a delegation from another system, showing them the joint human-Keth operations. His entourage was large and impeccably dressed, all shifting colors moving beneath pale skin, and walking among them, slightly apart, quietly ignoring the adults the way only children can, was his daughter. Her name, I would learn later, was Leah. She was small, even by the standards of young Keth, with large dark eyes and a faint gold glow beneath her skin that I later learned meant curiosity. She had drifted to the edge of the observation platform while her father spoke, leaning over the railing to watch the water below. The harbor was deep there, 30 feet at least, dark and cold and moving with the slow pull of the tide. The railing gave way. I didn't see it happen. I heard it. A crack, a brief surprised sound, and then a splash, and I turned without thinking. I saw the ripples. I saw the diplomatic party standing at the edge of the platform, motionless, looking down. Every one of them, standing, looking, and I was already running. Later, a Keth legal analyst would explain to me, in careful and patient tones, that what the delegation was doing was not indifference, it was compliance. The Fate Non-Intervention Statute, one of the oldest laws in the Keth Concordat, forbids any individual from altering the circumstances of another being without prior consent. It was written, originally, to prevent the kind of well-meaning cultural interference that had caused 3 interstellar wars. In emergency situations, the law allows for authorized rescue personnel to act, but only after the proper request has been filed and acknowledged. The filing process takes between 4 and 9 minutes. I was in the water in about 4 seconds. It was cold, colder than I expected, and dark beneath the surface, the harbor light turning everything into dim green shadow. I kicked downward, fighting the weight of my boots, and found her, a small glowing shape sinking slowly, limbs moving in the wrong directions, fighting the water the way someone fights water when they've never been taught how to swim. I grabbed her. She turned and bit my forearm, hard, with what I can only describe as a remarkable number of teeth for someone so small. I held on anyway. I pulled us both upward, one arm around her, the other clawing toward the light. She was rigid with panic, then suddenly limp. I felt the moment the fight went out of her, and held tighter. My lungs were burning by the time my face broke the surface. I gasped. She gasped. The water around us was churning, and I could hear the dock above erupting into noise that had been perfectly silent 30 seconds earlier. A security droid extended a retrieval line. I grabbed it one-handed and held on while it pulled us up. Leah still pressed against my chest, shivering so hard I could feel it in my own ribs. When they lifted us onto the dock, I sat down on the wet planks because my legs had made the decision for me. Leah was breathing. Her skin was cycling through colors I didn't recognize, fast and chaotic. Someone put a thermal sheet around her. Someone put one around me too, though I barely noticed, because I was looking at my forearm, which had a very clear impression of small teeth in it and was bleeding in a way that seemed, under the circumstances, completely reasonable. Ambassador Sayrath reached us in seconds, and the look on his face when he saw his daughter breathing, that flash of something raw and relieved that crossed his features before he composed himself, was the most human expression I'd ever seen on a non-human face. Then the station security arrived, and things got significantly less warm. I was detained, politely but firmly, and escorted to a holding room that was nicer than most hotel rooms I'd slept in, but still had a locked door. A legal representative arrived within the hour, a thin Keth official with a pale blue pattern moving steadily under their skin, which I would learn meant professional calm, and explained the situation. I had violated the Fate non-intervention statute. I had made unauthorized physical contact with a minor of diplomatic standing. I had entered a restricted harbor zone without safety clearance. There were 3 additional violations I don't fully remember, because I had stopped listening after the second one. I asked, as calmly as I could manage, what would have happened to Leah if I hadn't jumped. There was a pause. The official explained that the proper rescue channels would have been activated. I asked again. More specifically, I asked what would have happened to Leah in the 4 to 9 minutes it would have taken to activate those channels. Another pause. Longer this time. I told them I would do it again. Exactly the same. I told them that if the law required me to stand on a dock and watch a child drown while someone filed paperwork, then the law and I were simply going to have to disagree, and they were welcome to note that in whatever file they were keeping on me. The official looked at me the way you look at something you found that you genuinely don't have a category for. Ambassador Sayrath arrived 2 hours later. His aides arranged themselves in careful formation behind him. He walked to the center of the room, looked at me for a very long time, long enough that I started wondering if I should say something, and then he dismissed the charges. All of them. He turned to his aides, spoke briefly in his own language, and left. Nobody explained anything. I was handed my transit tablet and my cold coffee, and escorted back to the dock, where Dava looked at my bandaged arm and my still damp uniform, and decided, wisely, not to ask questions. I went back to work. I finished the shift. I went to the medical bay and got the bites properly cleaned, which the nurse handled without much comment, because working on Vashkar Station means you develop a broad definition of a normal Tuesday. I went to my bunk, and I stared at the ceiling, and I tried to reconstruct the decision that wasn't a decision. I still couldn't find it. 3 days later, an aide in formal Keth diplomatic attire appeared at my lunch break. I had a salami sandwich. I had somewhat better coffee. I was enjoying 30 quiet minutes, which on a loading dock is a rare luxury, and then the aide was standing in front of me, telling me that Leah had formally requested a gratitude ceremony, and my attendance was required. I tried to decline. The aide explained, with great patience and no visible sympathy, that declining was not something the gratitude ceremony framework allowed for. I asked if the ceremony could be small. The aide told me the ambassador had already had the main hall reconfigured. I asked if I needed to dress formally. The aide paused for just a fraction too long, looked at my work uniform, and said that my presence was the important thing. I wore my cleanest shirt. It had a small grease stain on the left cuff that I'd scrubbed at, and only made worse. The hall held every Keth diplomat currently stationed at Vashkar. They stood in a wide circle, their skin shifting slowly in patterns I didn't know how to read, the combined light of them making the room feel like the inside of a cloud at sunrise. There were beings from 3 other species present as well, invited witnesses to something that I gathered was genuinely rare. I walked in holding my visitor badge, and immediately felt the weight of every eye in the room. Leah came forward when I reached the center. She was composed in the way that children sometimes are when they've been told something matters and have decided to take it seriously. Her glow was deep gold, steady, not cycling. She looked up at me and began to speak in her own language, and the small translation device in my ear rendered it softly. You did not know me. You had no reason to help me. You did not think about what it would cost you. You only thought that I was in the water and you were not, and that was enough. In the understanding of my people, this is the closest thing to grace that exists. She held out both hands. In them was an object about the size of my palm, Dark stone, smooth, veined with a faint silver that caught the hall's light and held it. Old, ancient-looking, in the way that certain things are, where the age isn't just visible but felt. The translation came again. This was taken from the crater where the first stone fell from the sky, before my people had words. It has been in my father's lineage for 400 years. It is a soul bond marker. When I give this to you, I am adding your name to our lineage, permanently and completely. You are not owed a debt. You are family. In every place and law where my family is recognized, so are you. The hall was absolutely silent. I've talked my way through a diplomatic tribunal while soaking wet. I've argued with station security about laws I'd never heard of with a bleeding arm. I've worked loading docks for 15 years with the kind of people who sharpen their words on each other just to pass the time. I am not, by any measure, a man who runs out of things to say. I had nothing. Not because I couldn't think, because everything I thought of felt too small. Thank you was too small. Any explanation of what was moving through my chest in that moment was too small. The weight of what she was giving me, not a prize, not a medal, not gratitude from a distance, but a permanent place in her family, her lineage, a thread tied between her world and mine that no law could cut. I couldn't hold it and speak at the same time. I crouched down to her height. I pressed the marker against my chest with both hands. I nodded. She looked at me for a moment, and then she smiled. And even though her face was entirely different from any human face, the smile was completely legible. It needed no translation at all. An aide found me afterward and told me, in a tone that carried genuine awe, that the entire room had interpreted my silence as the highest possible form of acceptance. That in Keth ceremony, those who cannot speak are those who are truly moved. That my response would be recorded in the official account of the ceremony. I thanked him and walked back to my quarters and sat on the edge of my bunk for a while, holding the marker in both hands, feeling its weight, thinking about craters and stars, and the particular 4 seconds when something in me moved before my brain had any input in the matter whatsoever. I didn't cry, mostly. That was 11 months ago. I still work the loading docks at Vashkar Station. My shifts are still 12 hours. My coffee is still bad, and Dava is still wrong about the pallets. Nothing about the job has changed. Leah visits the dock every week without fail. She brings me a small Keth sweet each time. Hard candy in a dark blue color, with a scent like warm copper that should be strange but isn't. That tastes somehow like my mother's kitchen on Sunday mornings when I was 8 years old. Something spiced and sweet and deeply specific to a memory I've never shared with anyone. I don't know how she found it. I've decided I'm not going to ask. I wear the marker on a cord under my shirt. Nobody on the dock knows what it is. A few people have noticed the cord and asked. I tell them it's a family thing. That's true, and it's enough. I read, some months back, that 14 academic papers have been published about the rescue. The leading conclusion, reached by researchers who spent considerable time and effort studying the footage from 17 different dock cameras, is that humans possess something they are calling a fatal empathy override, a neurological tendency to act in favor of others before rational self-preservation can engage. They describe it as an evolutionary flaw. They describe it as deeply illogical. They describe it, in the most cited paper of the group, as a kind of controlled brain malfunction. They're not wrong. They just don't know what the malfunction builds. It builds a girl who visits a loading dock every week and brings you a candy that tastes like home. It builds a stone in your hand that has outlasted 400 years of history and now has your name in it. It builds a thread between two completely different kinds of people, tied in the 4 seconds before logic had any say in the matter. I'd call that a feature. I'd call it the best one we have.